Will Pangman, welcome to the Gnostic Media podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
Who are you, and what are you all about? We know you work with Tom Hunt from Mad Bitcoins, and that's what the Bitcoin group.
Yep, I'm a panelist on his show pretty regularly.
And what else do you participate in? How else would people know about you?
Well, I've kind of been a lurker or wallflower for much of my life. Kind of raised with the liberty mindset, fortunately, but never could really, completely get behind any particular liberty effort or movement or candidate or whatever. Throughout my middle childhood, adolescence, and early adulthood. And so the Bitcoin came to my consciousness about a year and a half ago or so, and the more I looked into it, the more I realized that there was nothing about it that I couldn't get behind. And so that kind of brought me out of the lurker, the wings, I guess. And I wanted to start a meetup group in the Milwaukee area where I grew up, where I'm from. Bitcoin meetups were showing lots of potential to really, bring this information and valuable education about this technology to more people. And, I was seeing some success in some other places, the typical places like New York City, Silicon Valley, Bay Area, LA, and a couple others, Miami. And I wanted to kind of prove to myself, like, if I can get a bunch of people interested in this topic around Milwaukee, which is, a smaller city, smaller market, then it can succeed anywhere. And so, yeah, I started the meetup group, and it's been very successful. We meet once a week, every Thursday night, and lots of new people every week, probably 20 to 30 people every week, lots of dedicated, loyal, regular members who come almost every single week. And that's led to a number of other opportunities. So I'm working on a couple startups right now, an animation video studio out of Chicago called pinkeyegroup.com, and a personal finance application for Bitcoin and eventually other cryptocurrencies called tapeke.com. So that's TAPEKE.com. And that's a very new venture, but I wanted to explore entrepreneurship too, and I saw that as a way to achieving the kind of freedom in my life that I dreamt of having or wanted to have throughout my young professional life, and couldn't really attain through the typical channels of climbing the corporate ladder or the regular, job hunt and the job market being very poor everywhere in the country, and certainly in the Midwest too. So I saw Bitcoin as an opportunity for a lot of these things, to bring my life where I wanted it to be, more free, more opportunities for my family and myself. And so far, it's been doing that. So that's, I'm the founder and organizer of Bitcoin Milwaukee, which is kind of what our meetup group has turned into. We have 130 members in that group. And I'm also on the Bitcoin Foundation's education committee, currently working on some university outreach programs and initiatives with both students and faculty. And I have a bunch of projects. I'm busier than I think I've ever been in life, and it's just a great deal of fun. There's so much excitement and fast-paced progress in this space. It's really exciting. It's given me a lot of optimism and hope for just my own life and direction in life, and for others too.
Jesse Ventura came out this week and said that Bitcoin is over.
It's been said that you can't stop things like Bitcoin. It's like trying to stop gunpowder. But what does the future hold for the revolutionary cryptocurrency, and where the hell did it come from? That's today on Off the Grid.
Since we all know that he's the official spokesperson for Bitcoin, what do you have to say about that?
Oh, I didn't hear that. But Yeah, it's stronger than it's ever been. It's like that every morning I wake up, or at least since I've been involved in late 2012. And I think it's probably just a function of what we continue to see, you know, lack of understanding among mostly the folks of an older generation, but not just limited to them, you know, certainly lots of folks in the Generation Y or millennials suffer from a lesser understanding of what this is, I think, and maybe a lack of curiosity about it too, which contributes to misconceptions. And, you know, we're used to, even though we don't trust a lot of what the media says, I think all of us sometimes find, you know, some slippage there where we do give them more credit than they're due with how they're disseminating information and dispensing facts or whatever about new things. If folks out in your audience haven't checked it out already, there's this great clip from the Today Show in 1994 where Katie Couric and Matt Lauer are talking about the internet, and they, you know, an email is internet email, and it's funny. It's just a 1 minute clip, easily found on YouTube, but it's.
But never heard it said, and then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
I heard you around or about in the lunchroom.
See, there it is. Violence at NBC, GE.com. I mean,
well, Allison should know.
What is the internet anyway?
Internet is that massive computer network, the one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big. How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't say anything in 10 seconds or less.
Oh, Allison will be in the studio shortly. What does it mean?
It's a giant computer network made up of, started from...
Oh, I thought you were going to tell us what this was. So look at the dictionary.
Very exemplary of kind of the typical understanding in the mainstream with regard to Bitcoin these days. So as more and more people get their heads around it, I think they'll realize it's not going anywhere. And of course, Jesse will too. And, you know, a couple months go by and he wakes up and Bitcoin is louder and bigger than ever. So,
well, it's interesting. And I was joking, by the way, when I said, you know, Jesse Ventura being the official spokesperson, because there is no official spokesperson for it. There is no one of the common mistakes that people make about Bitcoin is they think it's a company or a corporation or, you know, something like this. And it's completely not. This is actually something that's been sold in the mainstream media. It's it doesn't have any central authority or anything. It's a open source code that has been essentially created by a community and is out there for people to use, and anybody can actually go directly into the code and see how it works and check the security and see what it does and understand it for what it is rather than just, you know, making things up about it or, you know, etc. You know, but it's more than that. It's, you know, a network. It's this blockchain and a distributed ledger and a way for people to verify information and exchanges, making sure that nobody's cheated. It's a system that empowers people to be their own banks. It's a system that doesn't allow fractional reserve banking, or it doesn't allow creating money out of thin air, such as, you know, the banks today, as we learned from the release from the London Bank last week that Tom also had played on his show, is that, you know, it's not even fractional reserve banking. They create the money each time someone gets a loan out of thin air. They literally create it right then. And so this isn't possible in Bitcoin. And then we hear complaints of people who will say that, you know, well, the government and these people, they want to deregulate the currency. And so this is not a regulated currency. And so therefore, this is playing right into their hands. But, the government regulators are who have gotten us into this mess. They haven't fixed or solved anything. That's for certain. They haven't made anything better. It's the centralized system that we have now that is evidently and obviously a failure. And, so we look at this new system that's coming along as this government-created central authority or has a company behind it thing, or do we go in and do we study it, try to understand it, see it for what it is, see what it can do, all of these things that it can do, and many new things coming. But anyway, what I wanted to do is ask you from there, Bitcoin, some claim, is supposed to be all of these things, and others want to use it more as a Trojan horse and, bring it in slowly and carefully. But is Bitcoin too good to be true? Is everything that is presented in the authority just, those crazy libertarians or all of these other ad hominem attacks that we see out there?
Yes. I certainly thought Bitcoin was too good to be true when I started looking at it. It popped up in my consciousness, and I took a note in a little to-do list I have to learn more about it. A few months went by, and I didn't really get to that item on my to-do list, and then it popped up again somewhere in a podcast or a news article, TechCrunch or Wired or who knows where it came up again, late 2012 for me. And the second time it came up, I forget the nature of the story, but it compelled me to actually, okay, I'm going to drop what I'm doing, and I'm going to actually start learning about this thing because I want to, and I'm going to make time for it now because I think it's important to look at. And that's kind of around the time when I spent, you'll hear this from a lot of people, passionate Bitcoin users or Bitcoin advocates. They spent, many late nights for not just days in a row, but like weeks or months in a row. I know that was the case with me. It was, late nights after the family went to bed from like 10 until 2 or 3 in the morning every night, reading up on it, learning about it, trying to familiarize myself with the community that already existed around it on different online forums and Reddit and wherever else. And because, on the face of it, when you spend just as an aside, I think anyone can take an hour or two on a weekend and get their head around it good enough. That will hopefully spur some questions in their mind and then lead to further inquiry on their part. But in an hour, you can understand this thing. But for me, it wasn't, I wanted to go deep. I wanted to comb through everything, and I'm very thorough and kind of detailed in that regard with the way I like to learn. That's in large part due to my exposure to your work with the Trivium, Jan. I mean, I was been a listener of yours for a long time, and I appreciated so much of the material around the Trivium specifically, and just kind of codified the way that I liked to learn from a very young age into a methodology that I could like refer to, whereas before it was more haphazard for me, or just rough around the edges. And the Trivium method and your shows with Gino Denning specifically really kind of ironed it out for me and made it make more sense, in a documented way. So I really appreciated that. But when I was going through all this material for weeks and weeks on end, for probably 2.5 months, I started to think maybe this is too good to be true. The more you look at it, the better it sounds, the better it looks, the more capable and powerful it looks. And at every turn, it turned out that it was true, that, this is how it works. This is where it's uncorruptible. These are some of the vulnerabilities about it, but the likelihood of those being exploited is incredibly low as it continues to grow, and the computing power on the network continues to grow exponentially, and the user base expands exponentially, and all these things. So once I was convinced after those weeks that it wasn't going anywhere, number one, and number two, it was this incredibly transformative technology that gave voice to, gave the kind of voice to the common man that is typically reserved to the very, very few rich and powerful. Sometimes I refer to them as the powers that shouldn't be. But that's right. Where, like, that's something that I was concerned about it. Is this too good to be true? And that was always a question in the back of my mind, and that's pretty well settled for me now. I mean, settled many months ago, I think, for me at least personally.
How would somebody, go in and verify that it actually is what they say?
Sure.
Open up the, get C++ and open up the, study it and open up the code and study it and learn what it does, right?
I'm not a programmer and I can't read, different coding languages, but I have good friends who can, and had some of them early on say, hey, can you look at the source code here and tell me what you think? And what it does is, here's what's being claimed. And sure enough, they had no objections to at least what I asked them to verify for me. But for just the average person...
And this is what coders have actually repeatedly said over and over and over about it. Thousands of coders have checked out the Bitcoin code.
Yeah. It's pretty ironclad and very straightforward in that respect from a software code standpoint. But for the average person like me who can't read code and might need to rely on a trusted friend to interpret the actual source code for them, I don't even think you really need to go there unless it's important to you, and then do it. But just read the Bitcoin white paper, the original Satoshi paper. It's easy to find. Bitcoin white paper is probably a good Google search for that. And it's an academic computer science paper, but if you have a high school reading capability and some high-level mathematics, you can get through it without any trouble. And if you don't have that mathematical aptitude, just skip over the diagrams or scan through them. Skip over the diagrams and explanations of the cryptography itself and focus on the construction of it, the other parts of the paper where the design is described, and it's fascinating. It's very, it's very powerful read, that document. There's other places I think are really great for hashing out your debates and concerns and things like that. The online forums are, if you have the time and you like to play dirty in Reddit or Bitcoin Talk, I mean, that's a great resource as well. There's tons of great threads and articles on there to stay up to date on things. But really, I think it's going to your local meetup. That's where you can learn from other very talented people. I mean, there are meetups all over the place near large cities these days. I know there's plenty that don't have a Bitcoin meetup still. I'm working on doing my part to help change that, so that there's as a resource that a meetup exists near anyone, most anyone in a small, medium, large size cities in America. But yeah, it's the best place, I think, to have that open discussion in real life. You know how it is when you're in a car between a window pane, or you're looking through the window pane of your computer and communicating to people that way. We're not always the nicest to each other. In person, we have a little bit more cordiality with each other, which makes for a more constructive discussion a lot of times. So I encourage getting out to the local meetup and in person, meeting these people, picking their brains, because there's lots of very bright people who've been around this technology a long time at these meetups, and also lots of new folks where you can hash out some of these concerns amongst other people who are newcomers to this. And they come from all different ideologies and backgrounds, affiliations. So it's not just, hardcore libertarian types or hard money types, gold bug types, or, the tech geek kind of crowd either. There's, people from all walks of life and all backgrounds that show up at these, and I've been to a number of them, not just the one we have here in Milwaukee, and I've seen this. So it's a great place to go and settle your contradictions there.
And if someone found a problem in the code, couldn't they just present it to the public because it's all open source?
Yeah, so there are a number of bugs in Bitcoin. Satoshi, whoever he or they or she is, they weren't the greatest
and that's
software
Satoshi,
engineer.
not Dorian.
Right, yes. The mythical Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator or creators of Bitcoin. They're genius level cryptographer, not the best software coder, but to be honest, the core of Bitcoin is pretty much the same from where it was when it was released by Satoshi and began to be promulgated. But there have been a number of changes, many changes. So there's a good portion of the code, I think around half, I would say, last I read, that's
or even 2/3.
Right, that's been brought into existence from the development community that has sprung up around it after it was released in 2009 by Satoshi. So a lot of it is customized since that birth, or that birth date.
And if somebody was concerned about something, they could actually go in and create their own code or their own software to fix that and release it to the public. Or if they just wanted to use it for themselves, to protect themselves or whatever, they could do that as well. But, because it's an open source code and it's public, people can go in and they can see how it works. They can't break the cryptography to go in and steal people's money in their wallets, but they can go in and study the whole software and see how it works.
Yeah, so that's a really crucial point, because, anyone can work on the project without asking permission. You don't need a job application, or anything like that. You can just work on the project. I mean, all of the altcoins are kind of a demonstration of that, where people have taken the idea of Bitcoin or the invention behind it, and they've replicated it with their own tweaks and different features and different feature sets and things like that to experiment. And it just shows how robust I think the idea is, or the invention is.
Well, and someone recently created a whole new coin and a whole new platform, Nextcoin, NXT coin, which is, entirely separate. And I think that one is open source also, isn't it?
Yeah, from what I know, I'm not really familiar with Next, but it's really exciting. It's one of these, next generation alt chains that are really exciting, and it is open source. I know that much. It uses a different algorithm, proof of stake as opposed to the proof of work with Bitcoin. It's fascinating. They did, I think they did a complete pre-sale, so they issued all the tokens at once, which is different than Bitcoin too. So there's other experiments going on that are trying to explore the boundaries of this technology, this really groundbreaking, paradigm-shifting technology, and it's flexible. I know people have concerns about Bitcoin being kind of a means toward let's say a cashless society as an end. I think Tom, in one of your earlier Bitcoin shows, Tom Hunt made a great point that we were already kind of doing the cashless society thing with the current legacy banking system.
People using ATMs and credit cards and all of that for that, right?
Yeah, and you mentioned, just issuing money, issuing loans out of thin air, that kind of thing. I mean, the thing about Bitcoin is all the rules are right in front of everyone. There aren't any surprises.
So
there's constant surprises in the legacy banking system.
And with your point right there, let me just say that, this is something that constantly comes up is, Bitcoin regulation, and, Bitcoin is unregulated and all of this stuff. But when you understand the code, well, that is the regulation. A person can't add or take anything away from that by trying to regulate it and waving a government wand, wearing a costume and banging a gavel or something. That's not going to change the code and how it works. And so, it's the rules, the regulation is in it in itself. Now, there can be corrupt companies like, Silk Road or Mt. Gox, but that has nothing to do with the code of the coin itself at all. That's those companies. And so, when they, maybe those companies, maybe there's regulation over them or something, and that can be written into the code as well, and making sure that that people hold the keys to their wallets and never turn it over to these trade companies. And in fact, I think I've been seeing commands showing up in the help section of the console to be able to start doing trade directly through the console in the wallet QT. So I mean, this would be a whole new level also if you put your information directly into the blockchain and send it off. There's not even, it's in the code of the blockchain, and so then the company couldn't even try to cheat you. There wouldn't have been a Mark Karpellis or a Mount Gox, situation. And it seems that, over the last couple of weeks, there's been a stream of attacks on the exchanges, and it just seems it just seems obvious to me that these attacks they almost appear centralized,
Yeah, I don't know. It's certainly interesting. I see coincidental, like when there's DDoS or DDoS, denial of service attacks in the Bitcoin world of the web. Different Bitcoin websites. You see concurrent distributed denial of service attacks against mainstream websites, like around the Mt. Gox issue, meetup.com was actually under like a week-long DDoS attack. And so, yeah, it's interesting. Maybe there is some sort of coincidence or, something going on where...
Well, does it seem like, and I think I've heard you or maybe Tom or somebody talk about this, but does it seem to you that there's a coincidence with the negative press and the fall of Bitcoin? And it seems to me that every time they make the price drop, like this week, it fell back down into the 400s, great buy time. But it seems to me that whoever would be pumping out all of this bad news would then sweep in and buy up.
That's possible. I mean, market manipulation is certain. Bitcoin's not immune to that, I don't think. I mean, I've seen... with my amateur knowledge of trading and things like that, and it's grown considerably since I've been exposed to Bitcoin more and more. But yeah, from what I can tell, there's certainly some manipulations that go on periodically. That's no different than the regular markets that we're all used to. But the thing that's different, I think, is the casino rules don't change, and it's less of a casino. The volatility is exciting, but it's not.
Isn't the volatility because less than 1% of the population uses it? Wouldn't that be the real source of that?
I don't think so. I think the reason for the volatility is the exchanges are such a small portion of the volume going on in Bitcoin. And there's lots of off-market trades that happen that are big trades that maybe impact the price, but they don't because they're not happening on a Bitcoin exchange website. So those are pretty shallow pools of liquidity. So anytime there's any sloshing around of any kind, it creates a lot of disturbance, a lot of turbulence that needs to be settled out. And we'll see the pools of liquidity deepen as the exchanges kind of intermingle some more, and as we see a mature futures market emerge, and as we see more investment come into the space. I know Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz, one of the most prominent venture capital firms, mentioned on stage recently this past week at a Bitcoin conference that hundreds of millions of dollars from his firm will be entering, the Bitcoin market, probably in the form of investments into certain companies and stuff. But that's all that's going to do is deepen the pools of liquidity more and more so, and user adoption does that too. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of criticisms about Bitcoin that maybe you and I can hash out together today, Jan. But one of the ones that I like to point out to people is, those who have their doubts about Bitcoin, they often have their doubts about something with regard to Bitcoin as a currency or the price of a Bitcoin, or both. And
right.
To me, those two things, I love using Bitcoin as a currency. I've been doing it for about a year, pretty regularly, like a couple times a week. But it's fantastic. It's so much fun. And when you have to go back to like dollars or checks or credit cards, it just like shows you how old and outdated the system that we're all used to is. But as far as Bitcoin as a currency and the price of a Bitcoin, I couldn't be there. That might be the thing I'm least interested in about it. It's the price of Bitcoin is inconsequential to the magnitude of this thing as an invention. And I can tease that out a bunch more. I'd like to talk about that a lot, but that's often the criticism is it's going to only make some people rich, or it's too volatile, or things like that.
Will, why don't you explain to us what you mean when you say that Bitcoin is bigger in the invention and what it is than being a currency or its value?
Right. So really the problem that Bitcoin solves, the genius behind it is this decades-old computer science problem known as the Byzantine generals problem. I think you and Thomas talked a bit about this, Bitcoin as a currency being one of the least interesting things about it. So I think that's, it's part of it, and it's important, and it's providing kind of a new economy, really. The largest economy in the world could be argued to be the internet. And, Andreas Antonopoulos often makes the point that, and I think this really drives home why Bitcoin as a technology is way more interesting than Bitcoin the currency or the price of a Bitcoin. And that is, what the internet did for information, making it more widely accessible to pretty much anyone with electricity in the farthest corners of the earth. The most unlearned people who could never hope to have, high-level education in a pre-internet world now have access to that. So the internet really did gave information to everybody, gave everyone access. And as computers got cheaper and more proliferated, smart devices more proliferated in the hands of many, many people, even feature phones or dumb phones, with just texting, can now access all of this wealth of information. And there's a lot of freedom in there, when you realize, wow, I can access things on my own outside of what's handed to me in my small school building in my village in, remote parts of Africa or remote parts of Asia or something. You can access more than that now. And Bitcoin does the same with money, so
it would be sort of like maybe how people can select all of these different podcasts to listen to rather than being forced to listen to the 4 or 5 or 6, whatever they are, corporations that own all of the media that are controlled by the government, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no end to what you can learn, just by continuing to use this great tool of information sharing, which is really what the internet provides. And, again, to borrow from Andreas, he talks about Bitcoin making money a content type for the internet, where we are familiar with file sharing, MP3s, movie files, documents. We're more and more familiar with cloud computing and cloud storage and things like this. So, it's not, right now I think it's somewhat of a leap for a lot of people wrapping their head around this, but it won't be in a very short time as more people become familiar with computing in the cloud and sharing information over the internet, sharing money over the internet, peer-to-peer with no intermediary, is just an obvious extension. And it's something that was not possible 5 years ago, was considered to be impossible prior to 5 years ago. And that's the real genius behind Bitcoin, is it allows for distributed trust, decentralized consensus. We had governments in the past, and we still do, of course, but the rational reason for a government is so that consensus could be arrived at somewhat. It was like the best attempt that human beings could make to arrive at consensus for managing society. We've seen it morph, and your work, Jan, does a fantastic job of, bringing in the best minds on this topic. I love those episodes from the people you featured and stuff on Gnostic Media, like
Larkin Rose, etc.
Larkin Rose, etc. Yeah, and and we needed that, maybe you could argue, for physical security and for management of the community or the civilization, to arrive at a consensus of sorts.
Either that or it was always, somebody realized that, hey, there was this consensus, and if he could usurp it and make it all of his own power, then you keep
there's
everybody else under you.
Absolutely, yeah. Lots of very creative ways that has been commandeered. But what Bitcoin is essentially is consensus that's impermeable to being commandeered. You hear about the 51% attack, which for folks who aren't aware, that's if any one entity or group would could acquire 51% of the computing power of the Bitcoin network, and it might be able to be attacked by that group. There's a bunch of very good arguments to be made against that and why that's not advantageous for the people who might attack it, as a majority there. One being, it's more profitable for that group to participate faithfully in the network. Bitcoin as a network rewards honest behavior, honest action, more so than the fraudulent action. So it's impermeable to that in many respects. So I mean, that's fascinating to me. We have a way now to disintermediate one of the largest functions that we've allowed government to have, or for lack of a better term, that government has maintained or had dominion of, and that's the money. So money used to be a private thing, and in certain areas of the world it was more of a public thing, or at least a centralized private thing by an elite group of like a priest class or whatever. But now it's in the hands of everyone, and it's transparent, and the rules can't change, and the books don't just get deleted overnight or get altered overnight, or one morning you wake up in the town square, you hear a decree that everyone's getting bailed in on, and like in Cyprus. So this kind of thing isn't possible with Bitcoin. You'd need like a 90% agreement to, as we were talking about earlier, there are new features that are introduced into subsequent versions of Bitcoin. And it's important to remember that Bitcoin is still in beta. I mean, the most recent version of Bitcoin is 0.9. So it's in beta. It's not even at version 1.0 yet. So there are new features coming out and new additions and revisions to the code that are bringing more functionality, more features to people using it. And these things can only really get through if there's been deemed, a very wide consensus, not a perfect consensus, because there's still people who don't think this feature or that feature that is part of 0.9 is a good idea. There's always going to be people who have different opinions, but a lot of those people even have deemed that these new features aren't harmful, and maybe they don't like them or don't fully agree with them, but they're allowing of them because it furthers the development. So it's still very early, and this is what people need to realize. You hear people scaring others about the riskiness of it as an investment, or using the term Ponzi scheme or whatever they may say. Sure. And
tell that to the people in Argentina or Cyprus how risky it is.
Yeah. I mean, what
it's
they're
10
ignoring
times
there,
or 100 times safer than their own money there.
Right.
And historically, the dollar has always gone down. It's it's worth like 100 years ago, $5 now was worth 100 then. So I mean, look at how inflationary our money is, and then the dollar is, and then you want to criticize Bitcoin for being unstable.
Yeah, so it has these really great qualities, like a fixed rate of issuance. No surprises there. Every 10 minutes on average, 25 Bitcoins come into existence. And in January of 2017, that'll be halved to 12.5. And 4 years later, halved again, and so on. That's all predictable and very neat and tidy. And it's deflationary. It's got a fixed quantity. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins. That's very nicely, neatly predictable. No surprises there. It's a scarce digital asset, and there have been other such experiments like this, but none of them have had the decentralized aspect. None of them were able to solve the double spending issue in a distributed way, where everyone and no one has control, has total control. So that's really revolutionary. It's the most cooperative, democratic, egalitarian, kind of system of free exchange, free association that I think mankind has ever devised. And it's the first one that's capable globally, at least in the history of modern man. So it's worth trying. No one's going to lose their shirt buying $10 worth of Bitcoin and experimenting with it. And I encourage people to try it out, learn about it. You were mentioning...
What do you have to say to someone who would say, well, you have to be a member to use Bitcoin? Would that be kind of like saying, well, you have to have dollars in your pocket to spend dollars?
I guess. Yeah. Bitcoin is free to use, It's essentially free to use. The transaction fees are, fractions of a cent, fractions of anything we're used to. And it's you do need to have some Bitcoins to spend some Bitcoins.
Right.
But
it would be like, how would you get dollars? And most people know the methods of going out and getting money. You work, the government, they just print it, or the banks, they just create it out of thin air. But, normal people, they would think about going out and working or doing something, even mowing a lawn or something, and you get $5, and hey, now you're, I guess, a member of the club. Right. Yeah. So, if you want to ride a bicycle, I guess you would need to have a bicycle.
Yeah, Bitcoin is the only currency in the world.
And then you would be in the bicycle owners club, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, the way I like to explain to people, Bitcoin is the only currency in the world that you are free not to use. So
well, that's a very good point. And, and a lot of people may have a hard time getting that. And what you're saying is that all of the other currencies are by government decree, and you will use this to pay your taxes, and then first they print this money, then they force you to use it, and then they come and steal a third of it back every year. It's insanity,
Right. And the other thing that I don't know, you were sharing with me some of the comments and questions and doubts that have been coming into, the Gnostic Media from the Gnostic Media audience and community about Bitcoin. And I think it's important, to realize that the voluntary nature of this thing, like I said, it's the only currency in the world people are free not to use. You can use it or not use it. You can participate it or not. And you can see everything that's going on even as a non-participant. You can watch every single thing going on even as a non-participant. I know that you had some criticisms you were sharing with me from people who don't like the fact that the blockchain is so transparent, and or they're saying that it's very trackable, and that's true. It is very trackable. It's that way, so it can have these censorship-resistant qualities that it does. It's censorship-resistant. It's counterfeit-resistant.
Here's the thing, and, please, people, don't stop donating because I say this, but, if you make a payment through PayPal or something, you get an email. It has the person's name, their email address, possibly a phone number and a mailing address, and, you get the donation. But with Bitcoin, when I get a donation, I get an amount of Bitcoin and this long number, and then I can go into the blockchain and I can look at the long number and I can go, okay, well, that goes this far down this way, and maybe this coin was mined yesterday, or maybe it went through Silk Road, or who knows where it came from. But I can trace it. But for me to get an IP address and a name, it seems to me far more difficult. And as far as I remember hearing, the people the agents that brought down Silk Road, they didn't catch them because, You know, they figured out the blockchain, got an IP address, looked up in the phone book or whatever, and drove over to their house and went knock, knock, knock. You know, what happened was the guy used an avatar, and then they searched the avatar, and they happened to find someone else with a similar avatar. They looked into it, and by chance, they caught the guy.
Yeah, it was a case of good old-fashioned detective work, really. And it didn't really have much to do with using the blockchain for their forensic analysis of the evidence, right? That really wasn't a large part of the investigation from what I read. It was, as you just explained, it was mostly good old-fashioned detective work, you know, using IP addresses, servers,
if my point is that if Bitcoin was as vulnerable as some of these people claim, and you know, regarding anonymity, and there are things like AnonCoin and ZeroCoin that's just launching, but the point there is that even the FBI didn't get the Silk Road people because they figured out the IP address through the blockchain. You know, they did other detective work and figured it out. So compared to getting, you know, your credit card, you swipe it, boom, you have the person's name, you have pretty much everything that they've ever purchased on your central bank's location. Banks are hacked all the time. In December, Target was hacked and they got everything. And, you know, and I mean, it's like this stuff happens all of the time, but you don't hear it happening with Bitcoin. You might hear of a Mt. Gox or a person's wallet getting hacked. This company that was doing you know, donations in Asia, their wallet was hacked, and you have, you know, individual instances where somebody has a bad password or something, and these sort of things are hacked, but not a failure of the Bitcoin system. And I mean, it seems to me, I wouldn't know how to go through and find somebody's email, or, you know, private information through the blockchain. Maybe there are people.
Yeah, they can't find the private information, but wherever a person attributed their personal information to any particular public address, that can kind of be used as part of the breadcrumb trail there. But if you're using
if you bought something, for instance, and then you had to put down your mailing address at the company where you bought something, and then they mailed it to you, then they would have a record of your physical address from buying something.
Yeah, if for example, if a thief hacked that company and could acquire your mailing address, or if that company was subpoenaed by the government, you know, for some investigation about you or that company, and they acquired your information that way. So again, it's not a free for all. You know, it's available there with some really hard work involved. You know, the other thing you pointed out is and something that I don't know if many folks really think about when they're trying to compare our legacy money system to this new stuff, these cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin in particular, and that is that they work in two diametrically opposite ways. You know, the traditional system is a pull transaction model. You know, we have personal details that are associated with our accounts, our financial accounts, and we give up that account information and those personal details.
Right, so like your credit card number, that should be totally private, but yet you have to give it to the other party and then trust them to take the exact amount out that you said and no more than that.
And the same is the same case with checks. This is the same case with ACH transfers and this kind of thing. Money is being pulled and taken, whereas with Bitcoin, you can only send or spend Bitcoins. The person who holds the private keys, which are essentially, you know, the key to the lock of your Bitcoins, only they can spend them. And so you need to just have good physical security and digital security over your private property, which is these private keys of the private public key pair.
Like what you would normally do with private property.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, right.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I mean, again, this is hard for people because most of let's just say America, because we can see this pretty clearly, they're used to outsourcing their trust, you know, to a storage unit for some private property, to a bank for some money that you're purported to own and is purported to be there when you put it there, and you know, stay there in the same quantity or with the interest agreement.
You just trust, you know.
You do just trust.
And whereas Bitcoin, you control
You control
the
that.
wallet. And, and I've used the example before of, the address to a Bitcoin is like having an address to an atom in the universe, and then the private key to open it, that's twice as long to get into the atom once you find it. So then you can totally control that, and then it's distributed in the blockchain, which, it's like the concept of the mathematics of it, it's like all of the atoms in the universe, but it is this distributed system that anyone who uses it has a copy of it, and their computer verifies when they begin to use it that no fraud has been committed.
Right. Everyone has been made. If you're participating in the network with a wallet,
except with maybe multi-bit, right?
Yeah, there are lighter wallets that make it a little more streamlined of a process. But if you've got the entire blockchain downloaded on your computer, if you're running what's known as a full node on the network, which is you have the
full
file,
blockchain, right?
Yeah, the 14 to 16 gigabyte file that is, I think, right now. You are participating in auditing everything going on along with everyone else. So it's this really great inclusive process, and and it's
so instead of worrying about government auditors doing their job, it's like you and your own computer are doing the auditing.
Yeah, I mean,
by
Bitcoin
having your computer on and running the wallet, it is verifying. Sorry.
Yeah, you're going to be, again, you're disintermediating a lot of these bureaucracies that slow things down, that stifle innovation or hamper innovation, or just make for a cumbersome process of getting through certain tasks in your life. I mean, Bitcoin donates that and replaces their jobs, automates their jobs in a way that every user controls. This is not like Skynet. This is something that's determinant by each and every user. So it's this really beautifully designed process, and it's growing as with everybody, and with all the opinions and all of the ideas being put behind the development of this thing. So it's really a blank slate. It's like a lump of clay. Bitcoin is like a lump of clay, and these other things coming out are like different sculptures, or even more sophisticated things. Like sometimes I think of Bitcoin as like the one very familiar Lego block that is like the rectangle size four segment Lego block. And we're just now beginning to build more unique shapes and flavors and styles and brands of different kinds of the Legos that can build the really elaborate structures, not just this one block, which is what Bitcoin is. It's just this very basic naked thing. So, when people have criticisms about, maybe they want to use it for privacy, they really want it to be this perfectly private thing. Well, it's almost that. It's kind of that. It can be used that way with other tools involved, but it's more naked than that. It's,
sure.
And then there are things like Zero Coin and coin tumblers and
Anon Coin that runs on, the Tor network and on I2P.
Right.
So there are options where it can be, tunneled through other, encrypted networks.
Yeah. Yeah, see, I think it's like a great lesson that we all need to learn, no matter how awake we think we are or how angry at the system we are or whatever. Bitcoin shows us, it holds the mirror up to us and helps us learn some important lessons about private property, about what that means, and actually having to trust yourself again or rely on yourself to secure that private property. And we have to do it physically, which we're familiar with physical security these days. And we have to do it digitally as well, which we're not so good at.
Right.
We've been doing physical security for eons and digital security for a few decades. So
let me ask you this, and this is one of the common debates that I hear out there. A lot of people want to make Bitcoin so easy that people don't have to think about the cryptography and all of this, versus learning about the cryptography and really taking control and, knowing how you're protecting yourself.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people argue, well, the masses, they don't want to know about cryptography. But when you begin to learn cryptography and the way Bitcoin works, the way Anon coin works, the new Zero coin coming out, and these things, and how the Bitcoin wallets work, and then take it a step further, how the Bitcoin paper wallets work. It takes it to such a higher level in understanding cryptography and how it works, and learning to use passwords that aren't your dog's name and your kid's birthday or something like that, right? I mean, and that's actually what most people's passwords are. So to me, it's either their kid or their dog, and and a birthday or something. But to me, it's so important to understand the cryptography, because the more you get in and begin to understand Bitcoin and these cryptocurrencies, the more you begin to understand how to protect yourself on all layers of the internet, on Facebook, if you're going to be on there, with all of the information that came out over the last few months about the NSA spying on everyone. And now we see, even on the AMD website, when you go to download a file off of the AMD website, they have the SHA-256 hash code right there to verify that it was their original file. So companies all over the place are beginning to take note that the government has been spying, and even they are putting codes there for people to verify that it's this company's real software. So all of these things I think are beneficial, and that's what when you go to a website to download something, folks, and you see a hash code there that says MD5 or SHA-256, you get another piece of software, and then you can use that code to verify that that's actually the company's real software. That's their signature on it, to make sure that it's real and that the NSA hasn't spoofed their website and used fake software.
Yeah, or maybe not the NSA, but some other attackers, some other hackers.
Very good point.
So being able to verify that what's in the file is real and what you expect it to be before you download it is a great feature, and that's one of the things cryptography does. And Bitcoin uses, is capable of a lot of similar things. You can use the Bitcoin blockchain right now to verify that a document existed at a particular time and that its contents are what they're expected to be without revealing the contents to any counterparties. So in the same way that you just kind of described with like the torrent situation, we saw MD5 checksums emerge with torrents a lot, or at least I did, and that's really helpful if you're on a torrent site and someone's not baiting you into downloading the latest movie and really it's some malware,
and that used to be very common in the BitTorrent world.
And so even experienced users can be had like that, but like you were saying, I don't think everyone needs to learn cryptography, and maybe they'll have it as a part of like a core curriculum of some kind down the road, because I think it will become more and more prevalent, more important, more mainstream, or more daily use type of thing. But in order to learn these lessons I was talking about with regard to personal security, private property, what those things mean, again, trust in third parties, and the risks, the actual risks going on there. See, the thing with society and with the whole financial mess that we see is it's all a result of whether the central planning from the government or the financial institutions or whatever it may be. These are all, what we're seeing are symptoms of attempts to de-risk life, to lower risk for financial transactions, investments, or even lower risks in society. Like all the excuses to have these laws for the children, or the nanny state stuff, right? That's very much about de-risking life, and so what that does, the process of de-risking is a process of actually vesting more and more and more trust in a large entity of some kind that you're hoping won't violate that trust and will provide this lower risk environment in whatever area. And what we've seen is that blows up. It's unsustainable. And we saw that with the mortgage crisis. I mean, we've seen it in several cycles throughout history. And in the maintenance of empire, it's kind of obvious as well, too. So yeah, Bitcoin shows people that risk is real and that risk can have a good side and a bad side, and to actually define these risks and accurately understand them before pursuing certain decisions, reminds people you won't make the same mistake twice if you jump into some risk you're unprepared for or unaware of, or haven't researched completely and get burned. The second time, you'll take more time and assess the risk. And so I know there's a bunch of people who have heard me on other podcasts or things talk about going and getting involved in Bitcoin, and I always suggest that people buy $5 or $10 of Bitcoin, because you can do that. You don't have to, people say, oh, Bitcoin's too expensive, it's $500 or it's $800.
Well, yeah, you don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin. You can buy Satoshis, you can buy very tiny fragments, and a fragment of a Bitcoin goes up to 100 millionth of a Bitcoin, right?
Exactly, yeah. One Satoshi is the base unit of Bitcoin, and that's 1/100th of 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin. Yeah. So eight places behind the decimal point.
So that's the smallest. I mean, you would have a hard time getting it through the network because just the transaction of sending one Satoshi.
You would. Yeah,
right.
But as it proliferates and as it expands and grows, you won't have trouble dividing it down even finer and finer like that, or even beyond 8 decimal places. That could certainly be a new feature that's added down the road to another version of Bitcoin, where they say, yeah, we've got such demand for these units that however many quadrillion units there are in 21 million, 1/100 million times 21 million, whatever that is. But yeah, so you can even add, this isn't adding more units or inflating it, it's just slicing up the pie finer and finer and finer. So that's not inflation, that's more divisibility. And that's something that I think people need to wrap their head around. So I think a lot of the misunderstandings about Bitcoin have to do with, and most of the public, like the people who watch cable news and rely on that as the majority of their information, I think it results from a poor understanding, or not having mathematics and science very well understood or well taught throughout schools. I mean, we've seen the deterioration of education, the education system for a long time now, and that's, I think, a symptom of that. But from among the autodidact crowd, or certainly the listeners to Gnostic Media and other such podcasts and media outlets out there who are putting out such quality information, well resourced, well documented, I think some of the debates or the objections to Bitcoin from those crowds come about because there's resentment and anger toward, as you learn this information, you see more of the lies or more of the trickery that's been going on throughout society for, you could argue 100 years, but I would say thousands.
Doesn't it seem that as people understand what Bitcoin is, there's sort of a natural process that they go through where they suddenly see the government for what it really is at the same time?
I think so. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's. I was talking with an entrepreneurship class at Marquette University, and I let them do a lot of the talking. I let them tell me what their conceptions about Bitcoin was, and a lot of them had to do with the fact that it's used for drugs, or that it's not a good currency because of the volatility, or whatever, the typical things. And you have to explain to people, people like to rely on the dollar because, the dollar is, one of the more stable government currencies out there. It's one of the top 4 currencies in the world. It's the world reserve currency. It's relatively stable compared with so many other countries who are having major capital controls and really bad, even worse than the U.S., currency devaluation going on. So they, people who are, let's say, still in the mainstream sort of mindset, and at a university, learning about this kind of stuff, they're stuck thinking that, I have FDIC insurance if anything goes wrong. But what they don't understand is that, if 3 to 5% of people who have a bank account insured by the FDIC had to make a claim on that insurance, the FDIC, it couldn't be honored. Only 3 to 5% of people would need to have a run on their bank or whatever to or make a claim on that insurance for whatever reason, and it wouldn't be able to be satisfied. So it's not really insurance. I mean, that's not real insurance. So and who knows, with the way things are going, I sure hope we don't get there, but I think it's likely people should look at the potential for such an event kind of maybe taking place. And we should be thankful that we have something that's can very nicely work in parallel with the current system, but is completely apart from the current system, where we need these on-ramps and off-ramps. And that's where a lot of the government regulation that people are reading about, that's where they're clamping down, is that on-ramp and off-ramp area. They really aren't touching the Bitcoin rail. Just the tributaries that connect Bitcoin to the legacy system.
Right.
And
from Bitcoin to dollar, Bitcoin to rubles, Bitcoin to euros, et cetera.
Yeah, and back and forth. And so, if you're more and more living your life around using Bitcoin or other hard monies, that's a good way to kind of opt out from this what most of us are certainly seeing as a predatory financial system.
Sure. So, and if you would just get, hey, landlord, would you accept Bitcoin?
Yeah.
And get as many people as you can to use Bitcoin, and then you don't even have to use the dollars. So then you're just, keeping it there. And and
if you think that's impossible, it's not.
It's becoming more possible every day. I mean, Overstock,
Certainly,
you can buy everything for your house now on Overstock.
Yeah, and go to your local meetup and collaborate with people. Come up with really neat strategies of how to approach a business that you'd really like to accept Bitcoin. Whether it's a landlord, a property manager, or your favorite watering hole, or anything in between, your pet groomer, whatever. And get a little creative about, one of the things we did was we had everyone in like 3 or 4 hour increments leave Yelp reviews on a merchant's Yelp account, saying, oh yeah, we loved your stuff. Next time I come, it'd be really great if I could pay in Bitcoin. Or everyone left a little different style message, and they emailed us and they wanted our help to integrate Bitcoin, and we did. And so it works,
Wow.
Have your events at these places you'd like to change. There's something called bit mobbing, where people at meetups will, they'll all meet somewhere and then they'll go down like Main Street or whatever, from business to business to business, usually like a hospitality or,
Sure.
food and drink establishment, and say, we've got 20 people here, or 7 people here, or 29 people, or whatever it may be. We want to eat here or drink here, but you have to accept Bitcoin. And if there's a manager or someone who can agree to do that on the fly, certainly someone in that group can help them make it happen. And if they say no, then everyone leaves the door and goes to the next place, and that sends a message, And it's just fun. You don't do it with any kind of spirit, but a fun spirit. But it's these kind of strategies that really do work. If you get together with people and you're like, man, it'd be great. I still have to pay my rent and stuff like this. With dollars, but I'd love to pay with Bitcoin. How can I work with people in my community and figure out how to make this happen? And there are proxy services like joinsnapcard.com, a company called Snapcard, and you can pay your IRS bill through them with Bitcoin. You can pay your utility bills with Bitcoin. What you're doing is
not to confuse that the government or the IRS accepts your taxes that way. It's that this company acts as an intermediary, exchanges your Bitcoins to dollars, and then pays it for you.
Yeah. So if you're determined to kind of like make these statements, you can do it. There are plenty of good companies out there who are doing a great job of this, really fantastic entrepreneurs, a lot of youth, a lot of like really great positive energy among all these people, solving all these problems for us. So whatever you're seeing as a barrier in the near term or the long term, I don't know. I think I've seen close to it all, and it's all being taken care of if it's not been already. It's really exciting and optimistic. Bitcoin gave me a lot of optimism and hope when I was kind of lethargic about my outlook on my own life or the way the world was turning out. I didn't think the world was a place for a guy like me, because
and you're a parent too, right?
Pardon?
And you're a parent as well, right?
Right. Yeah. So, I was struggling to find a job that could meet my needs for fulfillment, not just my bottom line, but like myself. And, I didn't feel like I had credentials on paper to get me into the doors that I, could get access to a job that was like 70% or 60% of what I would consider fulfilling or something, and I couldn't even get in the door to those things because of just the way the system is, just the way the old world works, right? And then I found Bitcoin, and I realized this was going to be a booming economy. I think we're seeing that. It's a doorway into global commerce for any common person, any average person can become an enterprise.
And that, let's be clear right there, because when you say global commerce, a lot of people are going to be like, well, that's the new world order. But what you just said is for the common person. There's no central bank. There's no IMF or World Bank or even U.S. federal government, U.S. Federal Reserve, involved. There's not even your local bank is involved. It's you and the person or company on the other side of the planet, or in your next door or wherever that you want to transact with. Yeah. And that's it. And you're cutting out all of the intermediaries. They're totally removed from the equation.
Yeah, and not all the time, but whenever you really want them to be, you can construct the interaction or the transaction that way. You can just go P2P whenever you really want. And when you need to include other parties for more complicated transactions, there's a lot of really great solutions people are working on. You did some shows talking about some of them recently with Adam B. Levine of Let's Talk Bitcoin. Right. Those are super exciting, where we can actually do these really complex transactions now.
Right, like contracts and all of this right in there.
And what it really does is it's going to disintermediate law itself. I mean, we're going to automate this stuff with terms that are agreeable to all parties involved, that can be mutually changed, mutually managed, and with I'm going to say this, with no oversight needed, because it's not human action beyond a certain point. You're letting the software take over, and there's no it's transparent.
You're removing corrupt political officials and lawyers and bankers, etc., from the equation. So
yeah, and there's a lot of reasons why that's a great idea. And those people can be freed up to do more productive things in society. They can be freed up to do things that make them more happy.
Instead of being leeches on society and pulling society down, they might actually, go out and do something productive. I mean, that could, be the first for these classes of people in a way, many millennia.
In a way, that's I know a lot of lawyers and folks like that, bankers, who really do love their work, and they're not bad people. But they are working in a system that's antiquated and has become very predatory, if not by design from the get-go.
I suppose if there's a murder or something, you would still need some sort of method, and that wouldn't, but for any financial stuff, and nearly all crime is dealing with property,
Yeah.
But,
yeah, and it's kind of those folks might be, like the bankers, lawyers, bureaucrats, politicians, whatever. They might be emancipated. They might feel emancipated if they could be freed up to do something they're more passionate about. And another criticism I've heard recently is about this jobs thing, and like we can't afford to lose jobs. We need all these jobs and stuff like that. Well, anyone who's taking just a brief glance around can see that change is afoot, in society, and that we're going through a transition from, let's say, the industrial age to the digital age. We're still kind of in that transition space, and thank God there won't be the need for people to slave in factories in the future, right? I mean, we'll have innovations and ways of solving that problem, so that all of people's worst fears are accounted for.
How would like something like Bitcoin be used to prevent slave worker factories or something?
Well, I think what it does is it allows people to get why are there the need for society's managed from top down in all of these large countries where these major industrial places spring up, thinking of China, India, even in the U.S. And the reason for that is because, I mean, this is kind of cursory and very, very thinly described, but, the railroads and what that brought demand for, and airplanes and what that's brought demand for, and different innovations and things and what they brought demand for. And the capitalists, for lack of a better term, needed to supply a workforce to attain these goals. And, some of them are very just exclusively profit-seeking. Some of them are actually building useful things for society, such as railroads and stuff. But yeah, in order to accomplish their goals on the thinnest margins possible or whatever, they committed atrocities against mankind, some probably indirectly, but a lot of times directly. So, yeah, when we start to decentralize society more and more, and having money to do it is kind of like the first and most major step. As that happens more and more, people will be...
This isn't the typical decentralizing from government that we see with these huge corporations buying up government water facilities and stuff like that. I mean, this is actually returning it more actually to people.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's hard to, this is the tricky part, and so much of your work is about this, and what I love about it, and I hope the rest of your audience, pays close attention to the kind of language manipulation that's involved here. A good example is like every, debt ceiling, fiscal cliff, all these flourishing terms to describe something that's, pretty simple to understand, but when you put these euphemisms around it, it conceals what's really going on, and it also makes for a great tool to manage perceptions on a mass scale. Your work does a great job of uncovering how that works, but yeah, this is it. It shouldn't confuse people what the way Bitcoin is decentralized compared to other things. It's or how other things are referred to as being decentralized in our world today compared with the digital world. So just the same way that the internet kill switch thing, like people think that that's a possibility. You could turn off the internet in Iran, or put up the Great Firewall in China and things like that. But other places are still going to have. There's pockets of freedom everywhere, even within those places.
And there's mesh networks everywhere that would bridge right through that stuff.
Yeah, and you're going to see, people. It's like anytime there's aggressive, tyrannical behavior, it's like a fist clenching a fistful of sand, and sand will always slip through the knuckles. And I think that's how Bitcoin maybe emerged in the first place. Someone or some group of people really wanted to solve an important problem because of the tightening that they were feeling, probably. I think that's kind of clear in the Satoshi paper that, Bitcoin is very much about disintermediating certain institutions. Banks in particular, and then there's others too. But we had major. I mean, the paper was written in 2008. What was going on in 2008 with banks? In 2009, this thing hits.
I don't remember. Nothing happened in 2008, did it? Nothing at all.
Yeah, I mean, a call to action happened, right, for people who wanted to solve problems, and I think that's what we're still seeing.
So somebody wrote a program to remove the banks and then the governments that keep propping them up from the equation.
Yeah, and it's really well designed because it's a thing that works even better than Bitcoin might be the most perfect money. It's not perfect money, let's get that clear, but it might be the most perfect money mankind has ever seen. Certainly the most rich in terms of features and potential. I mean, it's like superhero. It's got these superpowers, right? Like the power of teleportation. The power of infinite divisibility. It's decentralized. It's everywhere and nowhere. It's you can't chop its head off. I mean,
it's like and it's just so funny when you hear these TSA agents and stuff trying to like search people for it. I mean, they're looking for something that doesn't exist in physical reality.
Yeah,
but
that was
same. But it's like
it can be scary for people.
And let's talk about this tax issue, and what that's all about, and the whole issue with the tax, this new law, them not even bringing it to the public or a hearing or anything, and trying to force it retroactive on people, 2 weeks before taxes are due. All of this nonsense. Some leading Bitcoin people are saying it's a good thing. Let them think that they're clamping down on us, and other people are frightened by it, and it has caused a big sell-off in Bitcoin this week, and of course somebody's buying them up too.
Yeah, I don't know if the IRS news is what caused the sell-off or not. That kind of stuff is hard to tie together, but I certainly think any clarity at all coming out of these bureaucracies that have a large amount of control over the population, clarity coming out is a good thing. So whether they, the fact that they just came with an answer helps in general. And it's interesting too, FinCEN came out with its guidance last year, I think in May of last year, and right around one of the,
who is that?
Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. It's another Treasury Department agency. Regulatory agency. And IRS is also obviously a treasury agency. So you have different rulings from both. The FinCEN ruled or, issued its guidance basically defining Bitcoin as a currency. And that was so it could fit within some of their money transmission rules, some of their existing regulations. So, I think we've seen, honestly, I'm surprised at how, for lack of a better term, fair so much of the news around regulations has been, from these bureaucrats. Here's the problem I see. You've got FinCEN and the IRS out of the Treasury, both with kind of competing rulings. So at any point, you might be non-compliant with either one, So, and I think maybe that's by design to keep people confused and wondering, and so that you're always wrong. You're wrong with one or the other at any given moment, right?
Well, and the interesting thing, though, it's like in money transmission, et cetera, and these rules, like you're saying with FinCEN, I mean, you don't really ever transmit money. There's a blockchain and you have a password, but that's it.
Yeah. So it's good that the IRS came out and clarified, a little bit there. I think it, I was watching a live stream of the conference this past week out in San Francisco, and one of the biggest Bitcoin proponents, very prominent venture capitalist, former Facebook honcho, I might butcher the pronunciation of his name, but I'll try. Chamath Palihapitiya, I think is how it's pronounced. He's on stage giving a little fireside chat, and they're streaming it to the world so everyone can watch. And he's basically saying that this is a good thing because there are some tax loopholes that some billionaires have been enjoying and exploiting for a long time so that they don't have to pay taxes on their capital gains for some of their asset properties, right? And now that this is the ruling around Bitcoin, and that Bitcoin is so accessible to the common person, that now that opens the door for the common people, the average Joe and Jane, to exploit these same loopholes. Kind of rolling their tax burden downhill, kicking their can down the road. I don't know what those methods are or what those exact loopholes are, but I mean, this is what Chamath is saying in front of the entire world, essentially, because it's streaming live. And I think that's another good thing. If we can, a lot of the big gripe from both Occupy and the libertarians is that, the 1% or whatever have special privileges, right? And they can enjoy them because of their status, because of their resources. Bitcoin allows us to have access.
And suddenly everybody can hedge or push their stuff downhill and do all of this stuff that that only they could do before with these large stock markets and hedging money in different banks and different currencies all over the world and Swiss bank accounts and all of this stuff. So now
it's accessible to you from your desktop computer right now. It might take a day to download the blockchain, but
if you have a older, slower computer, I think if you have an i7, it'll do it in about 8 hours. So
Oh, nice, nice. Yeah, it's I mean, this is a good thing too that, you know, the IRS calls Bitcoin property essentially, because that's really what it is. You know, when people are struggling to understand Bitcoin and how it works, and it's this money, and they're thinking of it in terms of their preconceptions of money and finance that have been drilled into us over the years, and what we're all used to. You know, this is a foreign thing. It's really hard to like grasp initially. But what I like to tell people in order to help them realize it is that think of Bitcoin not as money but as property, and that's really what you've got. You are holding property with it, and
even that's a really interesting concept, because again, it's like in the blockchain, that's like is mathematically like the atoms of the universe, and all you really have is a password to that.
Yeah.
You know, so you don't really ever hold any of this stuff. I mean, you know, it's like if you were to go into court, you know, I mean, it's like the Bill Clinton two-step, you know, you know,
Yes.
it's like, well, do I really have Bitcoin? Well, you know, I have password, I have lots of passwords.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you get creative, you can, you know,
kick the can really far downhill.
I think so. I mean, if that's what's necessary, sure. I think so. I mean, it's
keep your money away from the government. That's the idea, right?
Yeah, for a lot of people. For a lot of people, some people, it's just to have access to money in the first place, to banking types of services in the first place, and that's what Bitcoin does for so many people around the world. You know, in America, we don't so much think about that, I think, as Americans, because almost, you know, the majority of us can have access to a bank account. There are plenty of people in America who don't, but you know, it's familiar to us. So banking services. You know, the banking services provided by Bitcoin, unless you have that ideological bent, aren't very attractive. But for someone in Somalia or North Korea or Iran or Egypt or Zimbabwe or Greece or Cyprus or Argentina or these kinds of places where you can't get a bank account unless you're a privileged person, you can't do business, you can't pull yourself up out of poverty despite all your hard work, unless you have a certain set of privileges, now you can. Now they can. And that's what's so powerful about it. And what I wish more people in the U.S.
But it's not just banking services. It's on a higher level. They're their own bank at that point.
Yeah, yeah. So you administer those services yourself, essentially, in a lot of ways, too. And just by accessing the network, which is very easy and free to do. You know, that's what's so great about it.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to ask you, you know, why don't you talk about the Trivium in Bitcoin? Because I know you've studied the Trivium. You mentioned Gino Denning earlier and all of that. So, you know, mention what you think of Bitcoin and the Trivium as ideas together.
Yeah. So, you know, I don't have a very polished way of relaying this yet, but I think it's important to kind of conjoin these two concepts, if you will. I mean, I was describing my process of familiarizing myself and learning deeply as much as I could about Bitcoin. And of course, with, you know, using maybe spurious posts on the internet as a lot of my sources for that material, you had to turn on your critical thinking into overdrive. And again, it's like Bitcoin is just a bunch of facts, and a lot of people have the facts wrong because of mass media and misreporting and just salacious headlines and you know, gooey stories like that. But
confusing the Bill and Melinda Gates foundations. The other, what did they call it? It's BTC. Oh, better than cash, and so, you know, which is BTC, which is Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I know major researchers that actually confuse that with Bitcoin itself, while I'm repeatedly telling them no. You know, Bill and Melinda Gates and Citibank and Visa are not behind Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah, and even if they were, I mean, they're clearly not. But even if they were, it wouldn't matter one bit. You know, the rules are what they are. They're in action. It's being proven. The pudding is being proven repeatedly, constantly.
It's in the code itself.
Yeah,
you know,
Bitcoin walks the walk. You know, it's doing what it says it's going to do all the time, and it's doing it very well. And anything negative that comes out to maybe present a major risk to its health or longevity or functionality even has been subsumed by its robust, activity. I mean, all of these things, I've been involved in Bitcoin for what some might call a long time, but really not very long at all, since like late 2012. And in that amount of time, I've seen so many dozens of negative things come out about Bitcoin that I thought could potentially present like a death blow scenario. And lo and behold, a few hours go by, and it's back to where it was, or even stronger in terms of the price, or it's being adopted even wider. Like after the Silk Road bust happened, that was right before the massive 10 times price run up from like 100-ish to 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 even. So in a matter of weeks that happened, and it was because of a bad story that could damage the future of Bitcoin. Meanwhile, the public sentiment was the bad actor, the Silk Road, is gone, and now I feel like it's safe for me to put my hundreds of thousands that I was sitting on the sidelines with into this thing.
Sure.
And that's kind of what we're seeing happen. I mean, Mt. Gox goes down. We have a flash crash down to 400. It goes back up to close to 600. And, these are the patterns.
Right now it's at 500.
Yeah.
It was just at 502, and it fell down to 490 last night.
Yeah, and if people are zooming out and kind of looking at sections of the graph over long periods of time, I think they'll see, this is the pattern I see. A major run-up, spurned by whatever, and then a precipitous crash, or bubble pop, some people call it, where, the price goes down a great deal, but not below where the start of the run-up was. And then it will sort of find a channel and be pretty stable for a long time, like a couple months or maybe even a handful of months. And throughout that time in that channel, it might slowly decline, not much volatility, but just slow, price depression, mild price depression over that period of time, the latter 3 months of the 5-month stability period, before another massive run-up happens. And this isn't like from 10 to 100 back to 11, and then back up to 100, and then back to 11. It's, from a penny to $10, down to a few dollars, and then from there to $20, down to $15, $13, from there to $150, $260, down to like 75, 100, and then up to 1,100, and
even low or high 50s, and then it jumped.
Yeah. And it's going to continue this. I don't know if these patterns are settling out. We're seeing less volatility year on year. It's less volatile this year than it was last year, and last year compared with the year before that, and so on. And it's more valuable all the time too, over the course of like any 8-month to 12-month period that you look at. It's gone up. It's gone up, and so.
So what you're saying is another 5 months out, maybe we're looking at Bitcoin surpass $1,200.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it might be sooner. It might be longer. I don't know, but this is the pattern I've kind of seen. So we've seen it wiggle around 500, 550, and maybe we'll stay around 500. I don't see it going much below, like 475 or whatever. Just there's lots of support on all the exchanges.
And here's the rule of buying in: is you buy low and sell high. And right now is what they call a low.
Yeah.
So,
well, I would say this is what I think. If people want to start amassing some holding in Bitcoin, like my usual advice is just buy $5 or $10 and get used to it. Just play with it, experiment with it, and then make your decisions from there. And hopefully that will lead to more research on your own. But if I think it's wise, it's not a bad idea if you have a spare $10 every month, or a spare $50 every month, or every week even. That's not, you wouldn't mind losing. You wouldn't mind, forego going out to dinner one night and instead buy some Bitcoins. I buy, whatever I can every week. Sometimes it's like $5, sometimes it's $50. It's usually around $20, $25 a week. And I buy every week on the same day. And, it's like a cost averaging strategy. That's really what that is from an investment standpoint. But I just do it because, I want to have as much of these as I'm able to safely have, because I believe I'm very bullish long term. I mean, a lot of bright people, you know, I didn't get this idea just from my own research. I get it from following and listening to lots of people I admire, respect their opinions, or they obviously have track records of success in this stuff, and they're taking a risk. They're stepping out on a limb, and they're, I mean, they've shown in the past when they do that they can usually be successful, and they're not advising ridiculous stuff. It's not like Ponzi scheme level promises, you know. Just be careful. Don't put any more in than you're safely able to lose.
Don't leave your funds in an online website. I mean, you know, it's even dangerous to leave it in your local bank and their website. So, I mean,
take good care of yourself and don't overextend yourself. I mean, some people have gotten burned because they get really excited and they put their half or most or all of their life savings into it, and you know, that's not stable. That's not scrupulous behavior. So just take care of yourself. If you're excited about it, stay involved with your local community. You know, there's great resources online for this stuff, and it's going to become more easy to learn this in the very near future. I'm working on some projects with that, with the, you know, the community outreach and university outreach stuff I mentioned. People are going to have an easier time learning this and integrating it into their life in the very near future. So just stay curious. I think people need to, you know, Bitcoin favors the curious. I really like that. I think it was said on one of those recent Bitcoin shows. Maybe it was Adam who said that. But yeah, if you're curious, Bitcoin will treat you well.
So looking at, you know, is there a way that the Trivium... Well, you know, let me back up a second and just say that when I look at the Bitcoin community, many of them seem very intelligent and, you know, already using something like the Trivium just on their own and that sort of thing. But do you see any benefit in trying to bring these two communities together so that it creates sort of a synergy?
Absolutely. You know, I think I've been really encouraged watching homeschooling communities integrate the Trivium into their curriculums for their kids. And that makes me really excited because, you know, I guess I kind of always naturally learned in a Trivium sort of way, you know, grammar first, at least, all the time. I was big on definitions, and my dad was, you know, would challenge me for fun, for games and for consequences sometimes with vocabulary, you know, tests, or he would, you know, work on my vocabulary for punishment or for just play sometimes too. But yeah, it was hugely advantageous for me growing up to think that way. And then, you know, I went to an all-boys Jesuit high school, and they didn't call it the Trivium, but they certainly were teaching us those skills, those tools. And you know, when I'm coming across Bitcoin, you know, it's or just the world in general. All the information out there.
I can hear the conspiracies going now. He's a Jesuit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a very religious person at all, but I do really value that.
You just went to a school. You didn't become a Jesuit, in other words.
No, but yeah, I mean, hey, one thing the Jesuits are really good at is teaching people, and I know everyone all my high school friends, you know, in the directions of the life, you know, they went many different directions than I did, but we all value the ability we were given, the training we were given there in terms of writing, critical thinking. You know, the theology classes we took were very critical of the church too. So it wasn't just propaganda. You know, it was very open-minded. It was which I think is part of encouraging, you know, like I said, it wasn't explicitly taught as the Trivium or even the classic liberal arts, but
so let me just
grammar and logic were central parts of
let me just bring you back a second. And, you know, how do you think we could bring the Trivium and these homeschooling communities together and show, you know, Bitcoin in that same sort of way? How would, in your opinion, how would that go about?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting possibilities there. So some of these same homeschool curriculums or homeschool groups that are already using the Trivium with their curriculums have started to do Bitcoin related things too. I've seen on Facebook groups and stuff like that. So they're already kind of doing that. But I think if we're going to, I think Bitcoin could be the tool to relate how this process is, how you go through the methodology, the grammar, logic, rhetoric, the input, processing, output. That's how computers work. That's how our minds work. Input, processing, output. And that's kind of, I wish I had a better grasp a more thorough grasp of the cryptographic method that underlies Bitcoin. It's not at the top of mind. It's something I've studied in the past, but it's not at top of mind. But I think you'd see there, like with inputs and outputs with digital signatures to spend Bitcoins, how there could be commonalities there that could be used to teach the Trivium to people who are familiar with Bitcoin, or teach people about Bitcoin who are familiar with the Trivium.
Or maybe, and Adam B. Levine and I from Let's Talk Bitcoin, I had mentioned, what about some sort of Trivium coin where people are rewarded? It'd be like 100% pre-mined coin, and you just give them out to people, and then they could, if they decided to use them for whatever, they could trade them between each other. But in the act of their use, it would somehow teach the grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and it would be intricately tied together in understanding the Trivium. It's just like, Namecoin and understanding DNS servers, and Anoncoin and understanding anonymity, and Bitcoin and understanding decentralization and cryptography. So it would be like, something not, that I would want to have any central authority over. So let's calm down, folks.
Well, it's okay. But, I think for some of those project coins, like Adam's LTB coin, and he's got another one, Gox coin, that might help people recover money from Mt. Gox that they lost in the bankruptcy there. There is a measure of centralization at some of these things. Like when Satoshi released the code, he was the central source of it. He had to disseminate it, and he had to recruit other developers to come and help him work on it. The difference is being willing to turn over the keys of control to the new leaders that you've recruited and stuff, and that each of them at one point will be willing to turn over the keys of control. That's how decentralization is built. You have a system with Bitcoin it's built in, it's baked into the code, and so it's just self-perpetuating in that way. But with something that may not be self-perpetuating, like say Adam's LTB coin, and I think he's working through these problems right now, and he's got some really creative ways already that he's talking about accomplishing that. But there will be some centralizing aspects, and it's a matter of trusting Adam. This LTB coin thing is just a project. It's a way for him to monetize his content and incentivize the creation of more content, and incentivize the increasing quality of content, and so on and so on.
It would be like trying to incentivize people to study the Trivium, and it's like, hey, you're rewarded or something for studying it, and then they would get free Bitcoins or whatever, or free Trivium coins for studying it. Yeah. And then they could exchange them for Bitcoins, or they could use them to tip, different shows, including this one or something like that. So,
yeah. It could be a way maybe it could be a way to grow that Trivium education site. If more people are creating Trivium-based content. Like, I think this is what I've seen with how Bitcoin's been able to spread pretty organically. The average person who likes it and learns about it wants to teach others about it. And there does exist lots of really great educational resources out there. But rather than going and cherry picking, things from those other resources, a lot of people are just generating their own content, distilling their understanding into some paper or some presentation or project, and then sharing that with people on their own, and they're building the library of educational content in that way. And only recently has the Trivium kind of come to the forefront of our community's knowledge, if you will, and shown us the light that it can bring, right? And And there needs to be more content of it. You know, what I always go back to are those Gino Denning podcast episodes. Those, you know, those are those are the best resources, I think. And then your website, I would say, is at least, you know, a fantastic partner to those. But maybe as a way to grow that website's content to incentivize more people, maybe some of these homeschool groups and their students, the children, you know, learning this stuff. You know, here's a good way that maybe I can tie together the two. Bitcoin teaches people how to have private property again and how to secure that. And it's self-empowering to take control of your own property again, where we've been used to outsourcing the trust and maintenance and storage of it all this time. And the Trivium gives people so much self-confidence. And the Trivium itself, practicing it and using it, builds self-esteem and self-confidence, because you start to, you know, the person starts to gain confidence in their ability to distinguish fallacies from reality and truth from falsehood. And as you get good at resolving distinctions, oh gosh, the word's slipping my mind right now, but you always, contradictions, resolving these contradictions. You know, whenever you find a contradiction in information, the Trivium is the way that we go about settling it. And
instead of just saying, oh, well, we can't know the truth, the Trivium, you know, whenever you see a contradiction, folks, it should trigger you to say, I don't have enough information yet. I need to dig down further and throw out the one that's the fallacy and get down to the primary documentation or the primary information, whatever it is, and find out the truth. When you see a contradiction, it doesn't mean there is no truth in the world, ladies and gentlemen. It just means that you're not down far enough into your research and you need to dig more.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's more work to do, and there's more information out there to have. I mean, I was lucky enough maybe to have this spirit within me from a young age, but I wasn't satisfied with answers I got from teachers, and I was homeschooled for a couple of years, and my teacher was my mother, and she would give me some answers sometimes that I wasn't satisfied with. So when we got to go to the library or something, I had those answers or those questions in my head, and I was searching for more information to bring me an answer. You know, I wanted to know who built the pyramids as a kid, and none of the books I read helped me resolve that, but they did a much better job of going through the process than listening to teachers and parents and whatever,
must
or
have been
churches.
Space aliens, right?
Yeah, who knows? But you know, I still think,
obviously the onus of proof, you would have to have some evidence of that.
Sure, but I still think those answers are out there. You know, like Fox Mulder, the X-Files. The truth is out there. You know, there's answers out there, and we just have to keep looking. We're not done looking yet.
Right.
And so it's that spirit. It's not being dejected that, oh my gosh, it's going to be harder to find the answer here. But having that spirit of adventure, like, oh my gosh, you know, got a long way to go. Let's get, you know, put your ruck on and let's go.
All right. So what do you want to say about open versus closed systems?
Yeah, I think so. Again, the people who have a lot of objections
watch
to
your
Bitcoin,
zipper there. It's rubbing on the...
Excuse me. Yeah, the people who have a lot of objections about Bitcoin, I don't know if, you know, as it pertains to like, well, you know, we have insurance, FDIC insurance on our bank accounts, so that's better than what, you know, Bitcoin, there's no insurance, there's no regulation. These kinds of objections. The system that we live in is you know, a centrally managed society, or any centrally managed institution is closed. You know, it's
here's the funny thing.
You can't opt out of it.
So, you know, so a company is created to insure your Bitcoins, right? And so then all of their requirements to get their insurance require you to learn cryptography to take care of your Bitcoins, right? And then you don't need the insurance.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think this is what we're going to see. I mean, what you're looking at in the Bitcoin economy today with companies like Coinbase, companies like Circle, and there's the other big ones, right? You're seeing business models that are sort of mimicking the legacy system, but available for use in the Bitcoin space and with the Bitcoin technology. And it won't be very long before we see next generation technologies come out that render even those business models obsolete, and everything is decentralized, everything's in the cloud, everything's in the browser on the client side, and the concerns that people have about, oh, but Coinbase could do this and they could take over like these bad corporations, or I've heard a lot of different.
Well, I mean, isn't the founder
concerns,
of it? Wasn't he a former Goldman Sachs guy who got some of the largest funding in Bitcoin? Ever.
There's lots of people who are leaving.
But there is reason to give pause when you have these big, these guys from big financial houses moving over, and studying the banking industry. They're so overlapped with CIA and Intel. It's crazy.
Yeah, and if you're these innovations are not far off, where we won't have exchanges as we, like a Mt. Gox or like a Bitstamp. A couple decades, maybe even less away, we'll have decentralized exchange where the marketplace will exist in the cloud and you can enter it anytime you want from your client, your Bitcoin client, or, some software on your computer, and actually do a peer-to-peer exchange with software that does the market making and all of that, without a central business that you have to trust your Bitcoins with while you're using the exchange, which is how it currently works. So we're not far off from eliminating even the problems that we're seeing emerge from solving older, worse problems, if that makes sense.
So just so you know, in the new version of Multibit that just came out, I'm just looking at it now. I was playing with it yesterday to just see some of the new technology in the new release of Bitcoin. But we have exchange on Bitstamp. You can show second row. So in the new version of Bitstamp, they're already beginning to put trade directly into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is
and it's got
it's amazing how quickly
it's got 4 different exchanges listed in here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's lots of ideas.
And those, to your point, are central exchanges, and you're saying further down the road it would even totally cut out the exchange, and it would just be a part of the network itself.
Yeah, and there will be a business model behind that, and a way for the companies or the softwares doing that to earn commissions and things that everyone finds fair and hunky dory. And I guess any concerns like that Bitcoin could turn into the system we already have today, or that Bitcoin's a Trojan horse to lead us into a digital utopia that is only a replica of what we experience today, but more digital or more state of the art or something. They're not seeing what's afoot with the development community and stuff. I don't think they realize how
they're not taking the time to listen to the developers and read the papers and bring in the real information down at the base level. Find out what the people who created these coins are actually saying, not what the media spouting the propaganda says.
One thing that was really great for me to feel, I just felt like edified and just like fulfilled from hearing some of these presentations being given at these conferences. You can watch them on YouTube later. Some of them are live streaming these days more. The conference thing is so popular. But you see these developers get up on stage and they are talking about something you're learning about. Me in this case, I'm learning about Bitcoin. I want to learn more about what's coming out or what people are working on. What are the problems? And then they say something like philosophical or that touches on, like, you get a little taste of what their worldview is. And at least me, coming from kind of an anti-establishment sort of free-thinking individualistic mindset, it's really satisfying to hear some similar things come from these folks, because there are very, very few TED Talks, for example, where you get a taste of that. And
that's for sure.
Right? And
TED
that's
Talk,
where a lot of people go.
The TED Talk, most of the shows that I see on there, they're about some new centralized authority technology or some new way that they've figured out kind of to manipulate people, et cetera. There's always kind of this underlying agenda there.
Yeah, and again, I think it's not that's where people go for some inspiring content and to feel like hope in the future a lot of times. And a lot of those talks do a good job of teaching people a little bit here and there in a 20-minute talk. But some of these talks being given at presentations at these Bitcoin conferences, you get a taste that all of these very smart people building these incredible tools around this technology, taking it to new heights. They are, a part of the individual-minded, freedom-minded, privacy advocate crowd. And, just to see how capable and genius they are, and to hear that they also seemingly align with your most precious principles is really satisfying. And that's another thing that gave me a lot of insight that this is a great tool for disintermediating the systems of control that have had their boots on our necks for so long. And that the people who are building this thing are far outpacing any sort of efforts to curtail this, any bureaucratic decrees that seek to hinder it. The innovation is far outpacing it. It's so much faster. I don't think it can be slowed, maybe in America, but not everywhere. And
it would be slowed from, with that, but then it would still be coming from without.
Yeah, beyond the edges, people wouldn't,
But America's free. What are you talking about, Will?
Yeah, I don't. I think we're freer than a lot of countries, right?
Freer than a lot of countries, but not
a lot of people. Yeah, I mean, hey.
I've lived in communist countries where I felt I lived in Yugoslavia during the war, and I actually felt freer there than here.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to places that are, like developing world countries or whatever, and there are aspects that are just so much more free in some respects, and then there are other things that are very much more so of a virulent police state in the same country.
Well, what's interesting, it's like, everywhere that you go, it's different but the same. It's like the people are pretty much the same. They have the same concerns. The governments are pretty much the same. You have different freedoms and different things that are illegal, but overall they're pretty much the same.
Yeah, and they're all trying different versions of the same experiment.
Mind control version 8.0.
Sure. I mean, it's there's been, I think it's been your show and probably some Peace Revolution podcast have talked a lot about the World War II era experiments in socialism, the democratic socialism in the U.S., the fascism in Germany and Central Europe, and then of course Eastern Europe and Russia with the communist socialism. So, and that was all cross-funded by the same interests, right?
And it's all centralized bankers. Yeah. And then they, in Russia, the Bolsheviks killed 60 million people, and then the Germans kill all these people, and then when you combine all of the centralized bank murders that were, without these centralized banks, these wars wouldn't have been possible.
Yeah. There's a great Ron Paul quote. I'll paraphrase it, but it's no coincidence. Is it any coincidence that the 21st century, the century of central banking, is also the century of total warfare?
Yeah. Well, and he's got his own issues too. But all right. So has all of the bad PR just totally broken Bitcoin? Like I started off the show by discussing Jesse Ventura going out and announcing that Bitcoin was dead, and all of the bad press, Mt. Gox, everything that's hit. So Bitcoin, it's finally done, right?
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that it bounces back stronger than ever from bad headlines or bad volatility or bad this, bad that. All press is good press. You hear that a lot from PR executives. I think in the case of Bitcoin, it's even more true. In the past, there were good things that would come out of people and innovation, but a PR campaign against it could pretty much squash it. You had good ideas that could come out. We just talked about Ron Paul. Whatever you feel about his candidacy for president or anything of that aside, he certainly did, awaken a lot of people to the spirit or concept of individual liberty and these kinds of things, and trying to take action to do what can be done to change them. Now, I'm no change from within type.
He was a really good political red herring,
Either that too, but the point I wanted to make is he was pretty easily squashed from a PR campaign standpoint. Whether it was his racist newsletters or this or that, or, it's easy not to cover that he's got thousands and thousands of kids at all of these liberal colleges that he's going and speaking at, far more, well attended than any other candidate, and all these kinds of things that would signify to the people, if it was publicized, the strength of his candidacy. I don't get involved in presidential elections, but watching from the sidelines, it was pretty clear he was being smeared to everyone, who was looking at it somewhat closely. And they're doing, attempts have been made repeatedly to do the same to Bitcoin. And because Bitcoin isn't like trying to become anything, it's not trying to become president or trying to usurp the bank. It's just doing what it's doing. It is, and it does, and
right,
and it walks the walk. There's no talk to talk. There's no talk to walk. It walks the walk, and that's why the PR
it's part of the code. That's what it does. What's that?
Right. Well, I think that's why any PR strategies to quash it can't work or don't work, because you wake up tomorrow, it's still there, and it's still doing what so-and-so talking head said it couldn't or wouldn't do the day before. It stares you in the face. You can't deny it. This is another thing why maybe, where the trivium comes in, perhaps. The more and more people who are like, yeah, I totally agree with Jim Cramer or Paul Krugman that, Bitcoin is going to go the way of the dodo bird soon, or it's not a good thing, it's really a bad thing.
The same Jim Cramer that was getting inside tips on the whole banking fiasco, that Jim Cramer?
Well, if they have followings, and if you follow those types, and you might read their screed about, Bitcoin going down the tubes or something and agree with it, and then a few weeks later, you're faced head on with something else that shows you, like Krugman called Bitcoin the antisocial network back last year, early last year.
It's actually the most social network I've seen.
Yeah. And I think that's being shown with the charitable giving culture that exists in the Bitcoin community.
Or how about the Doge community? Look at that. Wow.
Yeah, what they're able to do, what they've been able to accomplish. There's great efforts.
So they just funded a NASCAR. They sent the team to the Olympics. What else have they done? There was a couple of other things that they've funded as well. Didn't they fund they funded a water well in some African village and some other stuff too. So the Doge community is really taken off. Yeah,
they're doing from a PR standpoint in a proactive sense what Bitcoin hasn't had done for it, or isn't, the community around Dogecoin is incredibly.
Woof, woof.
The Dogecoin community has been incredibly smart and savvy from a marketing standpoint, and that's demonstrated in their tipping culture. They have more, like their Reddit tip bot is like something like quadruple the volume and amount of the Bitcoin tip bot on Reddit, but both of which are pretty popular and great tools for giving people Bitcoins who've never had them before, creating adopters, creating new users. And yeah, so it's always there. You're going to wake up and it's still going to be there. And, the debate about how it can work as a currency or not anymore because of the IRS ruling or what it really becomes, all that stuff is interesting and worth massaging. But I hope folks can take away the real implications are for this as a technology, as an invention, as an idea that, Pandora's box has been opened.
It's the great,
and,
you know, when you put it together with the Trivium, I see it as the two largest tools for freedom that have ever been put before the people. And I'm not talking about the legalese people. I mean, people as individual people.
Yeah. So we need a way to agree on value, to have interactions with each other, to create things together. I mean, human beings are creative and social beings. And so we need a means to do that. Money is that means, and it's been, you know, it's had its troubles. Bitcoin, I think I said earlier, is probably the most perfect form of money we've had yet in the history of humanity. And I know that's a tall statement, but yeah, I mean, it creates a fair environment that's uncorruptible. You know, if you know what you're doing, if you know the rules, which are easy to learn, it's an uncorruptible, fair environment to participate in for free association. You know, for your Fourth Amendment, your First Amendment, your 10th Amendment, your Fifth Amendment. You know, these kinds of protections, you can actually act on those inalienable rights using this technology. And in the same, you know, what Trivium is to information, Bitcoin is to money. You know, it's a way of parsing it out, understanding it, resolving contradictions. You know, that's what solving the double spend problem did. You know, that's how the blockchain works. I encourage people who are interested in, you know, in the same way that the Trivium resolves contradictions in terms of information, how Bitcoin handles the double spend issue and how the blockchain actually works. Take a look at that. It's very, very cool how the algorithms work, how the human behavior outside of those algorithms work, you know, where miners point their, you know, what pools they decide to join and when they decide to leave certain pools if they get too large. You see this self-regulating going on in the community, and it proves to me that, you know, the rebuttal you get against the anarchist framework of society, or a free society, or a capitalist society, or whatever you want to call it, is that that's chaos and it could never work, or we've never seen it work in real life. So there's no historical example of that.
Appeals to tradition, yeah.
Right. Whether you agree with that or not, I think we could point to some traditions, like the Cathars in southern Spain in the Middle Ages, who were then wiped out. But there's, you know, there are examples where freedom and free association did work in certain communities, very small subsets. But again, Bitcoin is walking proof that a peaceful society of voluntary interaction and exchange is possible. And these tools are coming out now. They're being put in the virtual world. Like the virtual world, the electronic, the digital world, the digital space is the place we would need to, like, for lack of a better term, outsource these tasks to, so that we can have peace in real life and in between each other in the meat space, in the physical reality. So it's just I mean, this might be going too far off on a tangent, but as alchemy is to create something out of nothing, or you know, to change base metals into gold, or something into something new. I mean, that's maybe what Bitcoin exactly does, right? It's the code is something out of nothing, and the way it's emerged and grown over these years is living proof, really. Every 10 minutes, living proof that you know, that this inviolable creation emerges out of this code that came from an idea that essentially came out of nothing. And yeah, it's just fascinating. It's really, I hope people can feel encouraged by it the closer they look at it. And every time they have a concern or a doubt or a fear or a skepticism, to, you know, not feel convicted on that or repulsed by it, but to just keep exploring, stay curious, massage it out, tease it out, keep learning. You know, maybe some of these contradictions you see with Bitcoin and the doubts you have can start to resolve some of the last remnants in your understanding of the way the world works, or the real beast out there, for lack of a better term, like understanding the Leviathan as a whole. Maybe there's some as yet unresolved aspects of a person's understanding about that continuing to pursue knowledge about what Bitcoin is, how it works, how it applies, how it is an instrument for freedom, and resolving the contradictions there can teach you more about, or help solve those last few questions you had about the way the world works. I mean, that's what it's helped me do. It's helped sort some of those last remnants out for me, and in a great way. I don't think we have to have an economic crisis more so or worse or more dramatic than we already are experiencing, because
Right.
we have some
and people in the current crisis can hedge in these other types of cryptocurrencies and protect themselves.
Yeah. It's a way to opt out. We can't completely opt out just yet, but we're getting there. And say what you will about seasteading and all these other things, but I think these are creative ways for people to, they know they can't ask permission to get the freedom that they want, so they don't ask permission, and they figure out a new way to achieve the freedom that they want without harming anybody and without attacking the establishment. Now, the establishment may perceive it as a threat anyway, because as the numbers grow on the side of disintermediating them, they will feel that threat. But I don't think anyone right now should be worried about governments or regulatory agencies or anything quashing Bitcoin. They obviously don't realize how great they realize that it's a threat. I think they do. But I don't think they have an understanding of how deeply of an existential threat it really is to their hegemony. And it might already be too late for anything to be done about it from that side of things. But if it's not already too late, and I think it might be, then by the time they do, certainly by the time they do understand it, it will be too late. The critical mass will have been reached if it hasn't been already. So this is here for us. We can use it now, and we can emancipate ourselves.
Oh, and before I forget, I want to mention that Satoshi Nakamoto sent me this sweatshirt here from. It was funny. The guy, he actually introduced himself as Satoshi Nakamoto. And,
That's awesome.
Sent me the big. But the joke is within the community that everybody is Satoshi Nakamoto. So
yeah, we are Satoshi.
Thanks for sending me the sweatshirt here. I think the website was Coin Apparel. I don't like to plug anybody, but there you go. You got a little tiny plug. Let's see. So, Will, was that your takeaway point? Are you?
I think it probably was. I hope people just stay curious and can keep looking closer and closer at what their doubts are. Again, with Bitcoin, there's an environment of answers. And the questions that don't have answers to them yet are projects in the waiting, but you can have answers. It's not like the Library of Alexandria in the world of Bitcoin was burned to the ground and we don't have all those answers anymore. It's
right. Right.
They're there,
and everybody's got a copy of it on their computer.
Yeah. We're curating it right now on everyone's computer. So there are answers to it. And find someone in the space that you can look up to or admire or somewhat trust, or maybe give an olive branch of trust briefly if that's all you're willing to do, and someone that you resonate with or resonates with you, and look at their work and see what interests you, because there's a lot of people out there struggling, and there is work to be done here in this area that is hugely rewarding, not just spiritually or personally, but professionally and financially rewarding. And it's waiting to be done. And your skills out there, whoever you are listening, are needed in this space and wanted and welcomed. This is not a thing you need to have a job application for. You just get to work. Just find a place to work, and it will favor you. Yeah. Fortune really does favor the bold in Bitcoin, even though it may not in our in the opposite of a meritocracy that we have going on with the professional world outside of tech, and especially Bitcoin. So get out there and I think the takeaway point would be get involved with your local meetup. Go to one meeting and talk to people and have them have them lend their ideas to what your doubts and preconceptions are, and you'll make friends. You will, and it's a really vibrant, happy, welcoming, warm, like loving community, and we need more people. Bitcoin is for everybody, So I think that would be it.
All right, Will, thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, Will Pangman.
Thank you, Jan.
You're welcome.